And I told her a bit about my story, growing up in anxiety, almost coming to an end 12 years after my first panic attack, and then getting out of it, going to the UK and the whole thing I just told you about, the corporate life and also the family. I mean, you can ask all my ex-girlfriend, I was not the best writer for love letters. If you had anxiety for such a long time, it's never fully gone. It's basically finding a way to deal with it and recognize the signs. Be very conscious, aware of the signs, the stress factors in your life, and then know what you need to do. My biggest why was preventing, firstly, children, teenagers from having to go through the same thing that I did.
Welcome, everybody. Today we have my friend Bjorn Kiggen with us, and I'm so excited to dig deeper into his story. And as you know, for Changemaker stories, I like to highlight the resilience stories of the people I know. So welcome, Bjorn. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Catherine. Long time no see. I think the last time was in 2018 in Hamburg for World Championships.
It's been decades. Yes. Bjorn, I would like to start to also let everybody know about you. Would you like to share a little bit about you, please?
Yes, so I'm Belgian, living in Hamburg since 2006. I lived in the UK before. I worked for companies such as Airbus, Hapag-Lloyd, and since 2015 for Jungheinrich, which is a 20,000 people intralogistics company. And I have two boys. They are 9 and 12, similar age as yours. And yeah, I've also written a small book about the not so positive background that I have and which we are going to talk about today.
Fantastic. It's hard to say it's not positive background because look at what it has brought you now.
Yes. But,
so it's only amazing and positive things. So one thing that I really admire about Bjorn is that his ability of just coming out of the really hardship experience that happened in his life. When I first met you, I didn't know about what you were going through. So when you actually shared that experience through a book, and I read the book with a lot of joy and also a lot of admiration, I must say. I think it's really true when they say, don't judge the book by the cover. And I think even with our friends, right? Because when we see our friends on a daily basis, we might not know what they're going through. So there's just so much depth in that book. But before that, Bjorn, I also want to highlight to everybody here, you have a full-time role.
Yes.
And you've got a family. And you
part-time. I have a part-time family.
And you wrote a book and you do more things. And so tell us a bit more about perhaps your full-time role and what you do.
Yeah. But before I do that, I wanted to reflect on something you said in your introduction. And it's so true that friends, we don't often know what friends are going through. I by accident, I met a colleague at the gym yesterday. He's I think 10, 15 years younger than I am. And we had a long discussion and he took me in confidence and he talked about the struggles he's going through. So I didn't know because he looks fit. He has the muscles, he has the brains. So it was very interesting to have this talk as well. But yeah, what am I doing? I work for Jungheinrich and we have basically two big business fields. It's on one side, it's forklift trucks, which I have nothing to do with. I work in their automation business field. So we build big automated warehouses, really interesting. And I do business development for after sales. So you don't want to only sell one of these big projects. You want to have continuous cash flow by offering services, hotline support, spare parts, and things like that. And it's still a pretty new field with Jungheinrich. So there was a lot of convincing with our foreign sales units to get on this boat. So it's very interesting, very international, very nice colleagues that are all working to bring this business field to the top in Jungheinrich. So it's very cool. So I do trainings. I look at KPIs, I develop KPIs, I mentor colleagues abroad to become professional in this work.
Okay.
I host conferences as a moderator, so it's really cool.
Okay. Yeah, so everybody who's German knows Jung Heinrich. So I think it is, well, it is just to say that it is corporate. It is a big organization. Yeah.
Yeah, I've since 2005, when I first moved to the UK, I've only worked for headquarter functions. So I did this with CP Ships in the UK. Then I moved to Hapag-Lloyd in the frame of a takeover of CP Ships. I worked in headquarters there. Then I transferred to Airbus. I worked in the German headquarters in Hamburg. And then I moved to Jungheinrich in 2015. And I've been working for headquarters since then. So yeah.
Yeah. So really this long career in corporate for you. And so what prompted you to suddenly write a book?
It was a seminar I was doing in Berlin for my work. And in the evening, I had a discussion with a woman who was also participating. And I told her a bit about my story, growing up in anxiety, almost coming to an end 12 years after my first panic attack, and then getting out of it, going to the UK and the whole thing I just told you about, the corporate life and also the family. And then she said, yeah, well, why don't you write a book about it? I mean, you achieved all this stuff. You're not bad looking. So maybe the press will pay some attention to it as well. And I said, yeah, why not? Even though I'd never written. I mean, you can ask all my ex-girlfriend. I was not the best writer for love letters. So I structured it. I had a plan that was to help at least one person. Then I had a bet with my sons that I would sell at least 1,000 copies. So on top of the mountain, there was this 1,000 copies. And then I needed to figure out, how do I get to the top of the mountain? So first it's the writing, then it's the marketing, convincing journalists, convincing book merchants in Belgium. Because I'm a self-publisher, Amazon was not that big back then in Belgium. So I needed a big organization to sell my books in Belgium. And I managed all that because I had this plan. But the writing process was very cleansing. I thought it wouldn't be, that I had digested everything. But yeah, I started off with English, finished it in 2019, December. That was a fun project, but then I translated it to Dutch, which is my mother tongue, and then I had luck. Then I was lucky because even though COVID started in 2020 and I couldn't go back to Belgium, I didn't have any network there because of being abroad for so long and having my past. I managed to convince a few journalists, and I got into the newspapers, magazines and stuff like that, and that skyrocketed the sales over there.
Tell us a bit more about why behind that book. The bigger story is really about you overcoming anxiety, and which is your personal why, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, overcoming, it's. I mean, if you had anxiety for such a long time, it's never fully gone. It's basically finding a way to deal with it, and recognize the signs. Be very conscious, aware of the signs, the stress factors in your life, and then know what you need to do. My biggest why was preventing, firstly, children, teenagers from having to go through the same thing that I did. So, or not having to go through it for such a long time. And I don't want to be so snobby to say be an example, but also show them that, but also adults, of course, because everybody can have a difficult time. But it was basically to show people that having a having psychological problems doesn't have to be the end of your life. I managed to have a career outside of Belgium for big organizations in headquarter functions. I have two great sons, and all these things were so far away when my life was almost over. Just before I turned 20, I was so desperate that I wanted to take my life, and I didn't see any future. I couldn't imagine having a family. I couldn't imagine working. I mean, I stopped studying. I was a prisoner in my own house, on the house of my parents, for 1.5 years by that time. And that's what I wanted to tell people.
Would you mind to share some of these struggles, maybe one or two, when the anxiety attacked, in what kind of environments? What were the triggers? Can you give an example?
Well, the first period started when I was just 8, so it was 1986. I was away on a school trip and was not that far from where I lived, so we were in a forest, and at one point we were playing, and the elastic of my trousers snapped, and I needed to hold my trousers, and I was thinking, oh, what's going to happen? And then I didn't realize it at the time, but I had panic attack symptoms. So I had sweaty palms. I had the feeling that I was in a tunnel. I couldn't see left and right. And at the same time, I started to have this typical flight reflex. I wanted to get away, and I had the feeling that I needed to go to the toilet, the big toilet. And I mean, any sane child at that moment would think, well, cool, I'm in a forest, I can go wherever I want to go to the toilet, but I couldn't. And I started worrying, oh, what if I'm going to do it in my pants? Are the kids going to laugh at me? And am I going to make a fool of myself? And that made it worse. But at some point it went away. But unfortunately, that occurrence made such a deep impact on me that the next day, when I needed to go to school, I got up and I started wondering, what if I have the same symptoms again during class and the teacher is not allowing me to get out? So I started having the fears before the fears. And at that point, I also started to show behavior to prevent panic attacks from happening. So I didn't eat in the morning. I went to the toilet 3, 4, 5 times. My mom told me that I should drink sage tea because that works relaxing on the stomach and on the bowel system. So I did this. The next year, I didn't go on the school trip because I thought it would happen again. So I started to both try to deal with the symptoms, but also start to prevent doing things at such an early age. And but at one point, my dad put me for the decision, because I had it also when I was having to go to football practice. And he told me, well, Bjorn, if you're not going to go today, because I told him I'm not going, I was on the toilet for the 5th or the 6th time already. And he said, well, if you're not going today, you're never going to go to football. And I was pretty good at it and I liked it. So I went, and I noticed that nothing happened. So the rest of my primary school days, they were pretty okay. Then that was the first. So that was manageable. That was like 2 or 3 years that I was impacted by the panic attacks. Then it was away for 2 years, and it came back in high school.
Yeah, I can relate with that. This anxiety is very much a physiological response in the body. Yeah, you start feeling it so much in the body. And it's something that we cannot control, it feels like, right? And that must have been really,
control
really
it with breathing
challenging.
exercises and things like that. But at the age of 8, I didn't know about breathing exercises, of course. And the thing you mentioned about stress is correct, because my grandfather died a few weeks or days. I mean, it's difficult to go back as an 8-year-old child, but my grandfather died shortly before the first panic attack arose. And like death of loved ones are often triggers for psychological problems.
And I'm curious to dig deeper into that when it comes to the anxiety and also the body responses to stress. Could that be also influenced by how we were raised in that childhood period? I
Yeah.
think to relate that with my experience, my limiting beliefs often come from people closest to
Parents.
me, from
Yeah.
parents, right? They don't know what they don't know, and they love me dearly, but at the same time, I felt it's liberating to understand. They're trying to protect me. However, it's also about time for me to unlearn those beliefs and understanding where that comes from.
Yeah.
It really helps me to say, like, I'm letting those go. I'm letting those beliefs go. So I'm
But
curious if
that's
that's
not easy
something.
if you had these beliefs for 30, 40 years.
Absolutely.
That's often the case, and we as parents, and I think the audience can relate to it as well, we often want to prevent making the same mistakes as our parents, but everybody makes mistakes. And I'm at a point now where I forgive my parents. And there were actually, I mean, both of my parents had an influence. My mother, she was the sweetest person, and she lost her own mother when she was 7. So she wanted to be the perfect mom to my brother and myself. And she, I mean, she was the one that decided with my teacher that I didn't have to go to that school trip in 3rd grade, which I just told about. Which is, of course, for me, it was like, oh, well, I'm 9. I can influence adults to not do something, but I don't hold it against her. So, but she was, I mean, she was too soft with me. Also during high school when it got really bad. And then the second factor was my dad. I mean, he is not responsible for it either, but he was born after the Second World War, but he had this belief that he needed to hide failures for other people. So if you have something which is not in the norm, try to hide it. And if you see this as a child and you have your own issues which you cannot describe yet, and you have no idea what it is, you know that it's bad, but not what, you start copying this. You also, and that's the reason why when it started again in high school, it took so long for me to ask help or get help.
That's a great point. Yeah. And it's I guess we always mirror what we have experienced, and that's something it's really useful to just be aware of that. So thank you so much for sharing a little bit about that, Bjorn, and how is that now shaping your new professional identity beyond your full-time role, and what you're doing with that, because I think exciting things that you're shaping as a public speaker, as an author. And I'm curious about that journey, because I think that transition journey, it must have been a lot of hard work put into it. And how is that? How is your transition journey? What it is that you would like to share with others here?
Yeah, for me it was similar as for a gay person to come out of the closet. So I came out of my psychological closet. We entered in society again after being at home for 1.5 years. I did therapy, but I went back to study. I went to work. I went abroad, but I was always ashamed of what happened to me. So I didn't tell friends, girlfriends what happened to me, or just very small parts of it to girlfriends. The book basically allowed me to shake off to a great extent, sometimes not completely, but to a great extent, the belief of what do other people think about you. Because you cannot you cannot always influence it, and it doesn't matter, because you need to be happy with yourself. And if you're not happy with yourself and and your self-esteem relies on what other people think, you're always chasing something which is almost impossible to achieve. So the book basically, like I said, it appeared first in English, and I needed to do some marketing on LinkedIn. At that time, my work didn't know what happened to me. So I was thinking, well, I'm going to get fired. I'm going to get negative comments and stuff like that. And nothing of that happened. So there were people coming up to me asking, it was pre-COVID, asking for coffee and telling me, well, I've read your book or I heard about it and I think I have something similar. And with Jungheinrich, I mean, they're so open to what I did. I get so many opportunities. As soon as they discovered that I did the keynotes for Belgian and Dutch organizations, they gave me this platform as well. So I do keynotes, I do mental health workshops, and this is just great. So all the negative things which I was imagining in my head to happen didn't happen. So
fantastic. Yeah, and how do you balance that? How do you balance your full-time role and the side projects? You have a full-time role, you've got family, you've got two children, and then on top of that, you also do all this marketing for your book and also do all these keynotes. And I think a lot of people in my community in Stepping Up are the people who would like to launch dreams. And they do that either they say, okay, I quit my role right now, or they do that alongside their full-time role. And I think a lot of people ask this question a lot. How do you do that? Is that even possible? What are your tips for them?
Well, at the moment, I'm still working full time, but it takes a lot of energy to talk to organizations. I mean, also, I have a lot of other translations from the book, so I need to do something with that as well. But with a full time job, and when the kids are with me, it takes a lot of energy as well. So it's difficult. So what I try to do is when the kids are gone, I try to do as much as possible, but also concentrate on myself. So I need me time as well. So I need to swim. I need to go to the sauna. So what I often do is I take my laptop, personal laptop, to the fitness, to the gym. And then when I did my swimming, my sauna, I go to the resting area and then I'm writing emails and looking at addresses and things like that. If I want to be really successful with it, I need to reduce my working hours at some point as well, because it's the dream that I have, and I think it gives me energy for my main job with Jungheinrich as well. But yeah, it's difficult to keep the focus. So you really need to analyze with what is taking energy and what can be reduced. Children cannot be reduced, certainly not at this age. I mean, they need our priority, and they will get it. So yeah, so I need to reduce something somewhere in the next months.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think I'm a believer that we can have it all, but sometimes we cannot have it all at the same time. And I think there's a time for everything, and everybody's priorities are different. So I think it's always good to reflect on our own priorities and to take that step by step. It is very important to do that.
Yeah. And also analyze yourself. Is what you're doing both as a main job and as a side hustle, is that really what you want to do? I mean, for me, I didn't think about giving keynotes or doing mental health workshops. That's something which developed along the way. So my first goal on top of my mountain was to have the book. Then I was on top of the mountain, and then I saw other mountains. One was publishing the book in Holland, because it's the same language as the northern part of Belgium. And the other thing was having keynotes, and then now I have another idea. But it doesn't always feel like work. I mean, when it's your passion, it's not so tiring as your normal job, I must say. I get energy as well from it. I mean, of course, if I stand in front of people for 2 hours and I'm talking and going into my past again, but also giving them tips how to recognize risk factors for your mental health and what to do, it's tiring, but I get so much energy from the feedback I get from these people. So
Yeah, I love that. I think I love that you mentioned passion because I think a lot of people come to me because my work as a coach and they come to me and share
Mm-hmm.
their dream projects. The first question I ask them, what is your why? Because just
Mm-hmm.
because some people do it, it doesn't mean that you have to do it, right? And I always ask them because I think this passion or this purpose, whatever you want to call it, it's so important because it's something bigger than yourself. And if you can have something that is like this fire inside you, you are going to be in this unstoppable state because you know you're on to something. You know, you're
And
on
of
to
course,
you make a
and of
meaning out of
course,
it.
yes, but of course, you sometimes have also like, why am I doing this? I
Mm,
had this a few months ago. Oh, why am I contacting so many Dutch organizations? It's not bringing something. But then all of a sudden, there were three organizations that contacted me for a keynote, and this why that you mentioned, Catherine, is so important. And I think it's also important that when you start, it shouldn't be about making money,
yeah,
because it was
exactly.
always my goal with the book to donate after taxes, because here in Germany you also pay taxes on the royalties on a book, to
Yeah,
donate the money that I got out of the book. Because I mean, I've been financially so fortunate since I started working abroad that I'm not reliable on any royalties. And so I did two good things with it. I tried to help people, and the emails and stuff I got show that the people got a lot of motivation out of the book and the talks as well, but also be able to, with a very painful, almost devastating my life story, I was able to donate so much money to different charities over here in Hamburg.
yeah, I think that's a great point of like finding that purpose that is really helping you to anchor yourself to something deeper. I think eventually also don't feel the guilt if you do want to make money, right, at some point. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
just to
yeah, yeah.
say that that passion is so important and that purpose is so important because when you don't know it, I think because there's so many people who are great at starting something and then very few actually finish it. And that's why it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make sense if you don't know why you're doing it. So I love that you mentioned that. So you talked about how you need your me time. Um, you talk about the mountain system as well. I would love you to share with us the things and the people. You talk about therapy as well. So I guess resources, habits, um,
Mm-hmm.
everything and everyone who have helped you as you're in this a new journey of your becoming and in this transition journey of yours. What have helped you the most?
The fact that if you do something good, that people will help you along the way, because I just mentioned that all of a sudden three organizations were coming, and I don't know if it's karma, but exactly at that time I was giving. I had in June I had four keynotes at work. I no three, and I had two mental health workshops in June at work, and I do them pro bono. And just at that time, these Dutch organizations came, and of course, with the talks, I make money because I need to go to Holland, Belgium. It costs money as well. um, that helped me, but also, yeah, having my mental health routine, taking care of myself, having a swim when I have a difficult day, going into the nature, doing breathing exercises, not just when I have a difficult time, but on a daily basis, doing breathing exercises, speaking to people. And if you have a difficult time, also go back to other difficult times that you had to see what helped you, what inner resources do you have to be resilient in the future.
I love
So
that.
it's a mix of people and things.
Yeah, yeah. I love the things you share. I think the last one also speak a lot to me because when I struggle with doubts, to remember what I have overcome in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and reflect on that because there's so much wisdom from that
Yes.
place, and to remind myself that I do have the capabilities and the strengths and the inner strengths to actually overcome that, and I will overcome this one. So thank you so much for sharing that.
And the trust as well, the trust that everything will be okay.
Yeah. Oh, it's so
Because
hard to do it though, like to trust that everything is going to be okay, right?
yeah,
It's
but if you look back, everything got okay. So why wouldn't
yes,
it in the future? So
exactly, exactly. That exercise help us to reflect, and then uh, hopefully the aim is that to make sure that you know that life is always working out for you, right? To trust life again. Yeah, I love that.
yeah, but
Um,
also be thankful. Be thankful. I mean, I do it with my kids in the evening when they're at my place. Otherwise, I do it for myself. But also like a thank you journal. I mean,
yeah,
when I do it with my kids, I don't write it down, but I ask them, what are you thankful for today?
yeah,
And it doesn't have to be the big things. It can also be a mix of small things or just small things that happen during the day. So you come in to a positive mindset, but also on a regular basis, look back at the past 6, 12 months and see what all the things that you have accomplished. Because in our daily routine, we often think, well, I didn't accomplish anything. But if you then start thinking and taking the time to review the past 6 to 12 months and see what all the things that one has done, it's really energizing.
I find that sometimes precisely the little things, when you are able to focus and appreciate the little things, they help to train your mind to see more of those goodness in your life. And it
True.
helps you to build that positive mindset. And in return, you also kind of like see more opportunities in your days. And I think that's really important as well. So I love that you mentioned that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but it
Um,
was a learning part, I think, for all of us. If you want to develop yourself personally, you need to do something yourself. I mean, it's only the individual that can make the first step.
Exactly. All starts with ourselves. Bjorn, thank you so much. It's been really enlightening. And I guess to wrap this one up, I would love to hear from you. For those people who are currently perhaps feeling stuck where they are, not having purpose, or they are just, wanting to launch dreams and reinvent themselves, but are too scared to do so. What would be your advice for them to start with?
Well, I can't advertise for Nike, but they have a great slogan. Just just do it. I mean, there are so many examples out there of people that just did it. And if you are in a situation that makes you unhappy, you have three options. You probably know them as well. Either you can deal with it, you accept it, so you love it, accept it, or leave it. If the two options are not valid for you, you need to leave it as well, because there is nothing worse than being stuck in a situation until you retire.
Yeah. And
But
also,
you need
Bjorn,
to take, yes,
sorry, go ahead. What did
you
you want
need
to
to
say?
you need to take accountability as well. I mean, if you want to achieve something, you are the only one responsible for achieving it. So it needs to be the individual that does the hard work, does the
Yeah.
networking, makes the first step,
Yeah.
and don't blame it on other people if you don't achieve it.
That is so important. I think a lot of people want more things, but sometimes not recognizing the hard work put into it. What makes you not wait to launch that book, to just do that keynote? Um, what what makes you not
Mhm.
wait for?
Yeah, this is a very good question, Catherine. The waiting is fear. It's a
Mm,
fear of failure, a fear of getting a no. But this whole book process, getting keynotes, it was also a no game. If I would have given up after the first, the 10th, the 20th no, I would have never gotten this success. I mean, I can give you one small example. I told you that I needed to have a book merchant in Belgium, because Amazon was not there at that time, and it's standard boekhandel. And they hate Amazon because they see it as a threat. So when I came up to them, they said no. So I spoke with them 6, 7 times. And I think at one point, they said to themselves, well, let's give him a space in our catalog. And just at that time, I mean, maybe they would have called the police for stalking otherwise, but just at that time, a week later, my first newspaper article on the book and my story published, and that really surged the sales figures. If I wouldn't have gotten that space in their catalog, it wouldn't have. I think the book would have sold, but not so much.
Yeah.
And in the end, just with them, I sold over 800 copies. So they made money from me as well. But it took a lot of effort, and I could have given up after the first or second or fifth no. I could have given up after the fifth no from a journalist. And all these libraries that didn't want anything to do with me in the beginning. So my book is now in 1/3 of the libraries as an independent publisher.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, so that's don't be afraid of getting a no, because the more you try, the higher the chance will be of getting a yes.
Exactly. Ah, so good.
And make a
Thank you
plan.
so
Make a
much.
plan, because often, if you want to do something, it's still very abstract. So break it down in small pieces, and then make sure that you do the necessary steps for all of these broken down parts, because otherwise it can be too big.
I love that, Bjorn. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
Here. And thank you for all the struggles, and also for being real. And I am really sure there are people out there who can relate with you. And thank you so much for sharing your transition story as well.
Okay. Thank you for giving me a platform to share it, Catherine.